52 out of 138. Okay, let's go to some case studies. Let's go away from the big numbers. Yes. Let's first start with the Amazon. Everybody, when they think about Brazil, they think about the Amazon. And these are two stories from the Amazon. Both are award-winning lodges, but they started very differently. The Wacari floating lodge, no, I did not push anything here. Go back. You want me to talk about other things? Come on. Yes. I'm not touching it. So the Wacari floating lodge is in the Amazon basin, where the Amazon actually flows. It's a flood. It's floods. The difference between high and low waters is like 14 meters. Sorry, it's like 14 meters. It started as a PhD thesis on the monkey you see on the photograph, the white Wacari monkey, which only occurs there. And now in 2012, it's already part of a World Heritage Site, which is the size of Costa Rica. So it joins 3 conservation units. And it also combines a major research institute and a sustainable development program. Of course, the tourism operation there is very small. It's kind of planned to receive like 1,000 tourists per year. So that does not kind of save an area the size of Costa Rica. But the important thing here is that they have managed to combine science-based and conservation-based conservation area and use the tourism as a kind of showcase. It's a way of people learning what's happening in conservation. But that's, of course, not the reason to, you do not save the Amazon with tourism. Another example is the Cristalina Jungle Lodge. The Cristalina Jungle Lodge actually started out as a private investment. It's also an award-winning lodge. It's in the southern Amazon and exactly at what we in Brazil refer to as the Arch of Destruction, because that is where the agricultural frontier is eating up the Amazon from below. In this case, it was a private enterprise. It started first with a city hotel in the city of Alto Floresta, which is a frontier town where you first had people opening up the Amazon, gold mining, and now it's big for soy and cattle raising. And this is, of course, waiting at the door of the Amazon. And in '92, the owner of the Floresta Amazonica Lodge, she decided to build an outpost in the real Amazon, and she got immediate support from bird watchers because this area is very, very biodiverse. I saw that Korea has 500 bird species. In that area, you can see nearly 600, and they're still discovering new species. So she had basically, from the beginning, she had the bird watchers on board. This is where all the bird watchers who want to see Brazilian birds go to the Cristalino Lodge. And but she realized that she would not conserve the area just by having a lodge there. So she needed help in conservation. So she set up a conservation organization to kind of make sure that more of the area was preserved. So she managed to create a state park which links into an Air Force reserve, which basically is a whole corridor which is a big barrier against the agricultural people eating up the Amazon. So do these kind of things, are they really making a difference? Yes, they are. Is the Amazon out of trouble? No, it's not. Both of these places still have problems because, for instance, like the Cristalino Lodge about 4 or 5 years ago, the political lobby of the farmers tried to reduce the park and take her area away. And it needed a very important lobby campaign because there you can see how important tourism is, because she had this long mailing list of people all around the world and in Brazil, and they started kind of writing emails to the senators and the people in the Mato Grosso state. So you see, I mean, tourism in this case, it is not important enough as an economy to save the Amazon, but it's very important to get the word out. Of course, the agricultural lobby, and that's the important thing we have to realize, the Amazon is not important for tourism, it's important for ecosystem services. The agricultural lobby, if they cut down the Amazon, they will shoot themselves in their foot because the Amazon regulates the rainfall from the southern United States to northern Argentina. So if there's no more Amazon, it's not the lungs of the world, it's a sponge of the world, you will find that you also can't plant your soy or your cattle will have problems with drinking. So let's go to some other areas here. Come on, now you can go. Yes. So 2 stories from the Amazon. Now let's get a little bit closer to Rio. This is about conservation and destination. Again, one from the side of the conservation, the other from the side of, say, private enterprise. The golden lion tamarin is a monkey about this size, and it only occurs about 1.5 hours northwest of Rio. So any of you who are going to Rio, you can go and visit it, despite the fact that in the end of the 60s, it was nearly extinct in the wild. But fortunately, somebody realized that and set up a conservation program. And he started with making a protected area, and then he realized that he needed more genetic diversity in the pool. So he convinced the zoos all around the world to kind of produce more golden lion tamarins, and they were reintroduced in the wild. In 92, just at Eco 92, they started to introduce tourism there. And now in 2012, they have more than 1,500 golden lion tamarins in the wild, and they're also protecting 12,000 hectares, including 17 private reserves. And now you see why we suddenly have 1,000 private reserves in Brazil, because of these kind of programs. And also, very important for the destination, Brazil has, several states in Brazil have something called ecological tax distribution, which means they rate every municipality on what it's doing for the environment. They're looking at how much of the area is protected. They're looking at how much of the area has a watershed protection function. They're also looking at what they're doing with their rubbish and their sewage. And on the base of that, they get a score, and then they distribute part of the state tax funds based on that. So if you conserve, you get rewarded for it. Now, if you look at the other place, it's called Bonito, which means beautiful in Portuguese. And that is in the Cerrado or Savannah of Brazil, which nobody realizes most of the soy is grown in those kind of places. And in that case, the landowners, they were ahead of their time. They realized how important it was to preserve that beautiful area, despite the fact there was not even any tourism demand for it. And they already created a first private reserve in 94, and in 95 they did a very important innovation. They made a tourism council, and that tourism council decided to create a system to protect the areas, at the same time attract tourism. They call it a tourism voucher, and in this case, every attraction, every area was determined at carrying capacity per day, and that's how many vouchers you can emit. So your place can only receive 1,000 tourists per day, so that's how many vouchers you get per day. And that works both ways. It helps the environment and it helps the economy. Because if I emit a voucher, also the tax people in the destination also know how many visitors you've received at a price, and you pay tax for it. A big problem in the tourism industry that people don't pay enough tax. Now, Bonito has been voted the best ecotourism in Brazil since 2002 until now. It shows it really works. It receives like 100,000 tourists a year. And it has like now 10 private reserves, also has a national park. And again, it uses these state tax funds to kind of reward people for preserving. Because in both cases, tourism itself is not enough to justify putting aside these large areas. You have to look at the other function of the ecosystem. Okay, there we go. Turtles again, okay. And this is probably, in terms of tourism, is probably the most successful program in Brazil, Tamar. Tamar was, Brazil doesn't have that many sea turtles in terms of numbers. It does not have as many as Costa Rica or Mexico. But they have probably the best program in the world to save sea turtles. And by the end of the 80s, they had 5 species. The 5 species, they had very low nesting populations. And now they have increased these nesting by 5 to 10 times, depending on the species. They did this through research bases, and these research bases were very important because they were at very beautiful beaches. So they got the tourists, and the tourists wanted to visit these places. So they put in visitor centers. Then they realized that these tourists wanted to buy T-shirts and toys and everything. So they have a big merchandising campaign. And they receive now basically 1.5 million tourists per year, and 40% of their budget, which includes also a lot of research, is covered by tourism. And, but the big lesson here is they are where the tourists are. That's the big difficulty of a place like the Amazon, which does not receive as much as of the tourism flow. They are where the tourists are, with a product that really relates to the tourism experience. Now I have to hurry, because I have only 5 minutes. Now this, I was asked to speak a little bit more about communication. This is, ties a little bit into what Richard was saying. About 5 years ago, together with the WWF in Brazil, we tried to get a linking tourism with conservation communication pilot, because we realized a lot of these conservation projects had difficulty getting out to the distribution channels. So we used the flag species, we made project selection filters and tour operator registrations, info for tourists, and promotion through EcoBrasil and World Wildlife Brazil. But we discovered a big problem, which relates to my recommendations later, is that in Brazil at least, conservation projects just don't have any idea what to do with tourism. So a lot of them are wary for it. We had a big difficulty finding new projects, except the ones we already knew, who wanted to tie in or kind of use tourism for that. So that was one of the problems in communication. And now for Rio Plus 20, I don't know how many of you are going to Rio Plus 20. We actually want to talk directly to the tourists, because they're the voice. I mean, the small margins are the tour operators, but we need to get the tourists themselves engaged. So we're using the green passport concept for a selected destination in the state of Rio. And when you get to Rio, you can download the app and you can see which destinations, what are they doing in terms of sustainability, and which things you can do there that will actually give something back to the destination as well. So if you go to Rio, make sure you download this. Now I have to get to my, yes. What, in my view, are the key challenging? First, what I call getting the numbers right. What I see a lot is that everybody thinks that tourism is going to solve the problems. I tell you it will not, because we need nature for a lot of other things. And tourism is just, if you look at the ecosystem services, tourism is just one part of the cultural value of ecosystems. So it's very dangerous to work just on tourism. You should always make sure that you show, in some places it can really make a difference. But for your whole nature, it will not pay the bill. And even the South African parks, they can't survive just on tourism. They still, their budget still needs a little bit more. And also, but the importance of nature is very important. Without nature, we can't live. Nature is about our lifestyle at home, not our lifestyle when we are traveling. Also, I'm a biologist, and I believe in the importance of interpretation, which is a tool which is very badly used in the tourism industry. Interpretation for me is a marketing communication tool. It's a way how I get people to visit me, and it's also a way how I can get people to change their lives when they go home, and it's not being used that way. And also we have to work the supply chain in terms of conservation and tourism. Because scientists are not talking to they don't understand tourism, the tourism industry doesn't understand the importance of conservation, and the tourists are lost anyway, they just want to have fun. So we must always promote the circular economy. We show people that the economy has to change. It has to be circular. It's not I throw something away and I don't think about it anymore. Everything I throw away will come back to me. We must measure things. We have to have indicators. We have to use tax incentives to help people conserve the right places. We should never forget that the tourists, they want to have fun. It's all about the fun. Except we can have the fun and they can learn things at the same time. So marketing should go that way. And it's also, people are always worried about their health. And there's been an American journalist writer has coined the phrase nature deficit disorder. We're spending too much digital time and we need to combat that to be in nature. And most importantly, we must create understanding. The scientists must learn more about tourism so that they don't think, okay, tourism will solve my problems, or tourism is a big evil and I must keep it away from my work. The tourism industry also, in my view, does not understand the importance of, say, natural cultural capital. And we as tourists, that includes me as well, we also must be much more conscious of, what we do on vacation. We should also try to take home, or depending on how unsustainable you are, or take what you have at home and bring it to the destination. That's my, did I make it? Okay.
Thank you to the panel, and there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a rather diverse set of views from NGOs, development agency, public sector development agency, private sector marketers, distribution, and international organizations, which leaves us for about half an hour of time to field your questions and comments. I believe we will have some roving mics about, if you can just raise your hand and identify yourself. And the folks that are in the back of the room there will approach you with the microphone. So questions, please. There's one right here.
오늘 그 발표해주신 그 많은 발표자들께서 그 해주신 내용들이 저한테는 굉장히 그 인상적이었거든요. 제가 한때는 조경학을 전공했고 지금은 그 보건학을 공부를 하고 있어요. 오케이. 나는 그 세션자들께서 다들 한국어를 잘하시는 줄 알고 막 해댔어요. 그 특히 저는 그 아리아네 자너 씨, 그 생태학자시라고 하셨는데 그 되게 인상적이었어요. 제가 그 92년도에 리우 회의가 있었을 당시에는 대학교 3학년이었거든요. 그 당시에 92년 리우 총회를 기점으로 해서 그 브라질에 그 지금 20년 지나갔으니까 20년 후의 환경과 그때의 환경이 그 회의를 기점으로 어떻게 많이 달라졌는지 그 또한 그 지속 가능한 보존과 이용의 어떤 균형이 얼마나 조화롭게 발전돼가고 있는지 되게 궁금합니다. 괜찮으신가요? 제 질문의 응답이?
Okay, that's a very, very big question. You're just asking me. I don't know how much time we have. In terms of, say, environmental consciousness, Brazil has grown a lot in environmental consciousness. They have, what people don't know, the environmental legislation in Brazil is actually very good. Their big problem is kind of making it stick. And but there's a growing awareness about the green economies. But there is in Brazil a typical fight between people who still think in the linear economy and just let's develop, and people who are trying to embrace the circular economy. And that's the big problem. And for instance, at this moment, while I'm here in Brazil, they're discussing of redoing the forest code. And redoing the forest code is basically backed by the agricultural lobby, who want basically to kind of get rid of fines they've already received in the past for deforestation, and also opening up new areas for development, like mangroves or the riparian forests. So it's very difficult to say. There's a big battle going on in Brazil to kind of move forward, and there are some people who want to move it back. In terms of tourism and the environment, I think the problem in Brazil is that the Ministry of Tourism does not really understand sustainable tourism, and the Ministry of Environment doesn't know how to use tourism. So it's basically the points I made in my presentation. Does that answer your question?
잠시 그 자너 씨께서 앞으로 하셔야 할 일들이 얼마나 많은지를 제가 잠깐 알게 됐어요. 브라질에서나 아는 그게 또 글로벌하게도 하실 일이 되게 많으실 것 같습니다. 고맙습니다.
Questions? On this side, yes.
Merci. Étienne Coffin, je suis au au ministère français de l'économie, qui est en charge du tourisme aujourd'hui. C'est plus un commentaire qui va peut-être d'ailleurs susciter des réactions des intervenants qu'une question ou une série de questions. Moi, j'ai été frappé par ce courant qui est au travers de toutes les présentations qui nous ont été faites, qui vient insister sur les aspects économiques de la conservation, de la protection de la nature. Et ça me renforce dans mes convictions. Je suis depuis longtemps persuadé qu'il ne peut y avoir de développement durable sans économie, qu'il ne peut y avoir de développement économique sans développement durable. Et ceci est particulièrement vrai dans le tourisme. Et j'en viens aux aspects plus particuliers qui ont été traités autour du terme de la biodiversité. Au mois de juin 2011, c'est-à-dire il y a un petit peu moins d'un an, le gouvernement français a adopté la stratégie nationale pour la biodiversité, qui est le deuxième exercice du genre, qui prend des engagements pour les décennies qui viennent, c'est-à-dire la période 2010, 2011, 2020, qui se singularise par rapport à la précédente stratégie nationale en ce qu'elle implique très directement les raisonnements économiques, les stratégies économiques, et quand je dis stratégies économiques, ce sont celles des pouvoirs publics bien évidemment, mais aussi celles des acteurs, avec, particularité française sans doute, un certain nombre d'engagements, un certain nombre de contraintes pour les acteurs économiques. Je pense notamment aux grandes entreprises qui interviennent sur les grandes infrastructures et qui sont aujourd'hui en matière de biodiversité contraintes à, je dirais, en gros, un système de compensation. Lorsque l'on parle contraintes économiques, compensation, biodiversité, bien évidemment, on rencontre tout de suite les objectifs en matière de biodiversité et en matière de tourisme, puisqu'il n'y a pas de tourisme sans développement durable, il n'y a pas de tourisme sans respect de la biodiversité. Ceci nous a conduit à un certain nombre d'exercices. Tout le monde dit tourisme et biodiversité, que c'est important la biodiversité pour le tourisme, mais comment fait-on? Alors on a eu un certain nombre d'exemples pratiques, tous extrêmement intéressants et à mon sens enrichissants. Donc nous avons de notre côté élaboré un guide à l'intention des acteurs économiques, des acteurs du tourisme, sur la façon de protéger la biodiversité. Et nous pouvons vous le communiquer très, très facilement. Enfin, ces textes, comme la stratégie nationale de biodiversité, sont facilement accessibles sur Internet. Et puis plus récemment, et d'ailleurs en association avec le Partenariat mondial pour le tourisme durable, nous avons rédigé et publié un passeport vert, un Green Passport, sur la biodiversité en Outre-mer, dont j'ai là un rare exemplaire imprimé, mais qui est aussi disponible sur Internet. On pourra vous le montrer. L'Outre-mer français, c'est 85% de la biodiversité française. Et pour tous les départements, les territoires, les collectivités d'Outre-mer, le tourisme est une activité absolument stratégique. Je pèse mes mots. Stratégique d'un point de vue économique, stratégique d'un point de vue social, comme on a donné quelques exemples dans l'océan Indien, au Costa Rica. Avec cette particularité aussi, je crois que nous sommes les seuls, qui fait que nos départements, nos territoires d'outre-mer sont sur tous les continents. Nous allons de la puce, du lapin jusqu'à la baleine, en passant par le pingouin, et avec beaucoup d'autres espèces locales. Donc ceci, ça s'adresse bien évidemment aux touristes, bien sûr aux acteurs du tourisme, mais aux touristes. Et pour conclure, ce qui me frappe dans tout ce que nous avons entendu ce matin, de ce que nous avons aussi expérimenté de notre côté, avec quelquefois des succès, quelquefois des échecs, c'est le souci de cohérence, qui a d'ailleurs été très très bien rappelé par plusieurs intervenants. Cohérence au niveau des pouvoirs publics, mais aussi cohérence des acteurs du tourisme et cohérence des pratiques touristiques. Je vous remercie.
I guess I would say, in reference to the last comment, that there's a common understanding between private sector and government. I personally haven't seen that to the extent that it needs to happen. I really feel like there's, as I said, a huge disconnect between the activities and goals of the private sector and the activities and goals of government. And I would pose a question to the audience: is what are some of the of the reasons that you see for that disconnect? It seems such a synergistic relationship to have for both sides to understand each other. Private sector knows how to create economically sustainable business, and government is concentrated on the environment and social aspects. So why do those two parties not talk in substantial ways more than they already do?
I guess just in this context, as Richard mentions, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development has a golden chance to combine the players in the private sector, in the governments, in the NGOs. And I think I would focus on that. It is very stimulating that a number of governments, and it's very nice to hear from France, that you have a policy in the direction which has something to do with spatial planning, of course. That is, of course, an increasing understanding, what we call TEEP, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, which we deal with here. And that not every development can place in every part of your country or other people's countries in the same way. So when we are talking about linking tourism and conservation, it has, of course, to do with spatial planning. It has to deal with protected areas, which is part of spatial planning of the country. And you have on the one side the approach which you can have from your country and from the governmental policy to see that frame and regulate and have laws and policies in that direction. And on the other side, and that's the focus of this project, to look at the concrete cases and the initiatives coming from the public sector to see that and promote that and do that both through financial possibilities, support protected areas directly financially in different ways, do that with promoting policies, encouraging their governments in this direction, and do that, as in particular Ariane has said and explained with some examples in Brazil, through the right education. So see that from both sides. I think it is very important.
We have a question here, one there, and a third one behind. Here first, and then on this side here. Professor Goodman.
Thank you, Deirdre. My name is Stefanos Fotiou, and I'm from UNEP. I have two comments and one question. My first comment is when Peter made his presentation, he talked about a figure, $30 billion needed to protect or to conserve all the protected areas. And I question myself, is this a lot of money or not? So, you know, I mean, it's difficult when you talk about billions, it's really difficult to understand if it's a lot of money or not. And I Googled the thing, and I tried to compare it with some figures that were more familiar. The first figure